This is the CineSnob Podcast.
Hello and welcome to... Oh man, I just pulled my mic into my face. Hello, welcome to episode 236 of the CineSnob Podcast. I'm Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafana.
I sat on the headphone cord and it yanked the mic into my mouth. So good start after a week off. So
yeah, that's the listener at home, and I do say one listener because I'm sure there's only a handful.
No, there's more than that. But
they're loving that.
Yeah. I had a busy week traveling. Cody. I was in Chicago a couple weeks ago, and then I was in Denver earlier this week. And I came across one of those tiny theaters in Estes Park, Colorado. The ones you kind of expect to be showing like just the big thing. This is obviously before Doctor Strange's release. But I don't know how many screens it had, but they were showing I believe the DreamWorks animated movie Bad Guys, and the Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent were the two movies they were showing. I felt that was a weird combination to have there, but maybe I'm underestimating the popularity of the Nick Cage movie, like mainstream popularity, but it just felt like an odd choice for those to be the two things to be showing there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess everything else that might have been showing would have been like stuff that's been out for a while. If they're funneling those movies in and out pretty quickly, but I don't know.
I feel like it should have been Sonic 2, and then I don't know. I was pleasantly surprised to see that, I guess.
Yeah.
I did stumble across another one of those theaters where it was shut down. It was a former United Artists theater that was shut down, and there was a Regal across the parking lot. So very strange setup there. So anyway, that was my adventure in Denver, suburban Denver, Colorado, which is a lot more expansive than I would have realized. I did a lot of driving, which was a little surprising to me. But
I was in a flipped ATV in Estes Park, like 4 years ago. You
flipped an ATV?
I was a passenger, but yes, it turned over.
Wow, how did that happen?
So we were in an off-road, an ATV park kind of thing, and they gave advice. They're like, if you see a rock, like steer into it, like it's meant to go over a rock, and that happened, and then the ATV tipped over on the rock, so it flipped on its side, and didn't damage it too much, which was good for my wallet, but yeah.
Did it have a roll cage on it, or was it just it's just an ATV you're sitting on?
Yeah, no, it did have a roll cage on it.
Oh, okay, so you were all right then.
Yeah, it was fine, and we were buckled in and everything. So,
oh, yeah. We
still not pleasant.
No.
Yeah,
assume not. Is it the first Jackass movie where they destroy the golf cart? And
yeah.
Like that's what that's all I think of when you're talking about that, just destruction. I don't know that I was physically prepared for Colorado to be, or Estes Park in Denver to be as cold as it was, and then the thin air really got to me too. I came back here to Austin with a bloody nose, which was fun.
Oh wow!
Yeah. Good times. And I tried to climb up half a mountain, and I couldn't do it, so I turned around. There was snow on the ground. It sucked.
There's no shame in that.
Chicago was crazier though, just because it's so massive and dingy. Every place, like, fittingly looks like a place where Batman would beat the shit out of somebody. Anyway, that was my travels. So I went to the Bean. Have you been to Chicago?
I've never been to Chicago. No.
I went to the Bean, the big silver thing, and it's it's so gross. It's covered with everybody's handprints. Like, you can just see handprints all over. And it was cold, so you touch it and it's just like greasy, cold handprints.
And that's in the age of COVID, which is like way worse.
Yeah. Another thing that surprised me is the bean is it's called the Cloud Gate or something like that. It's in Millennium Park, which is right on the shore of Lake Michigan, which I'm well aware that Lake Michigan is a Great Lake, right? It's one of the 5 Great Lakes. I was unprepared by how ocean-like it was. And I don't mean that like it's big. Like, I mean that it was like choppy and looked like hell, and there was lighthouses on it and things. And I kept telling people that I was with, I was like, I was unprepared for how, just how ocean-like this was. And they kept telling me like, oh yeah, it's one of the biggest lakes in the world. Like, well, yeah, I know that. God damn it. I was just unprepared for it to look like a goddamn ocean.
Yeah.
It looked terrifying to be out there. Plus it was like 35 degrees, and who needs that shit?
That sounds very unpleasant.
But apparently there's a lot of the people I work with are from the St. Louis area, and they would vacation in Illinois, or no, Wisconsin. And there's apparently some place in Wisconsin on Lake Michigan where everybody would go. It was like a known resort town. I don't remember what it was called, but they said if you filled your boat up with gas, you could ride across the lake like to Canada, which seems like a very Midwestern thing to do.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, but it's just cold as balls up there the entire time. So, anyway, anything exciting happened with you, Cody?
No, I don't think so. I think an interesting screening experience for the movie we'll talk about today. It's always fun to have an IMAX theater with 5 people in it, which is what the screening ended up being for me.
You saw Doctor Strange in the actual IMAX theater that's in San Antonio.
Yeah. Which, it's whatever. It's fine.
I remember the last one I saw there was The Dark Knight Returns.
Rises?
And the audio... Oh, sorry. Yeah, The Dark Knight Rises. And the audio was awful.
Yeah, well, that's in addition to those famous Christopher Nolan mixes where you can't hear anything anyway.
Right. Anyway, well, you want to go ahead and get onto reviews here so we can start talking about this movie?
Let's stop with the foreplay.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to reviews.
Here are this week's reviews.
This week we have Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. This is the second proper Doctor Strange movie. I guess something like the 5th appearance of the character in Marvel films. Who it has sort of become the de facto Tony Stark of this Marvel Cinematic Universe. But this is directed by Sam Raimi, who, of course, 20 years ago sort of launched the modern superhero era with the Spider-Man films. And now is back doing the same thing with Doctor Strange. Cody, tell us about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness and what you thought of it.
Yeah, well, so first off, for anyone who's listening or watching this, there will be spoilers here. If you haven't seen the movie or want anything protected, and you don't care, and you care about having things that are probably already completely out there on the internet and in conversations and in lobbies, steer clear.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that the TV spots are going to start featuring all the secret cameos and.
Well, the interesting thing about it was that they were never really hiding it all that much anyway. Like if you watch the TV spots and you understand like the characters that are referenced, I mean, you basically know who's going to appear.
There was one I felt like they kept pretty secret.
The one towards the end?
There was a would have been fantastic cameo that
yeah, but that's all.
I feel like
there's that TV spot where you hear Chiwetel Ejiofor say, "Here's the Illuminati," and if you know anything about that group of characters,
sure.
it's right there.
Well, there are
for it.
in those spots though there are like direct visual references to a couple of characters that.
Yeah.
Anyway. Whatever.
Anyway, yeah. So my review here is going to be a little bit like twofold because I have a little bit of a rant to go on that I've been thinking about a little bit this week. I mean, for starters, on the movie itself, this is the return to comic book movies for Sam Raimi, who's, as we mentioned last week, has been a little bit quiet in recent years in terms of production. I think you said that Oz, Great and Powerful was his last movie.
Yeah, he did some TV stuff, obviously, with Ash versus Evil Dead. But yeah, this last film was Oz the Great and Powerful.
Yeah, and I think the movie, this Doctor Strange movie, I think starts off kind of bumpy. I think that there's the first act is a little bit generic, and it takes a little bit to get into. I think like the fight scene that you saw there, I thought could have been in like any superhero movie at all. It was just kind of this like generic action scene, and I think there's a lot of those in the first act of the movie, and then you get introduced to the America Chavez character, and I think that's really what the bulk of this movie is it's sort of a twofold thing for me. It's like the introduction of America Chavez as a way to break into the multiverse for Marvel characters, and this is essentially like you could either call it like an epilogue or a season 2 of WandaVision, which is basically just taking that story and seeing it through to its proper conclusion. And I think the super fascinating thing about this movie is it's very clear from the moment it starts that you better have watched WandaVision or you are going to not know what the hell is going on with Elizabeth Olsen's character of Wanda / Scarlet Witch, because if you're just watching the movies, there's it's instantly all about how she is she just wants to kind of break into the multiverse because she wants to be reunited with her kids. And if you haven't seen WandaVision, you're like, what kids? What is going on here? And it is the first, to me, Marvel movie that like truly assumes that its audience has seen everything that falls before it, including the TV shows. It does not try to bring you up to speed in any way, I don't really think. So, for better or worse, that's full integration that you're getting here. But for me, I wasn't the biggest fan in this movie of that Wanda plot line. I think Elizabeth Olsen does a great job of with her performance, but I don't love this sort of it's a very kind of like one-dimensional note. And then the biggest thing obviously is that I think people are talking about is the sort of the way that somewhere around the middle and especially in the third act of the movie, it does become like a full-on Sam Raimi movie. And you get a lot of like really weird stuff. It's easily the weirdest, I think, Marvel movie, even weirder than something like, Thor Ragnarok. It's the movie is really bizarre. It does lean into horror quite a bit. And this is where Raimi kind of shines because you do see elements of his directing style in the movie. There's a lot of like that shaky close-up camera work that you see in like the Evil Dead movies. There's good usage of that. There's a whole segment of the movie that features Doctor Strange inhabiting like a zombie version of himself.
Right.
That's really weird.
With a lot of evil spirits like around him and in his face and saying weird shit. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you also get I think this is probably the most violent, like gory, graphic Marvel movie thus far too, because there's one scene which I'll talk about in a minute where all the cameos happen, where that like there's like some brutal kill scenes, especially for like a PG-13 Marvel movie. So anyway, the movie itself for me, I just was never really truly super on board with it, and it goes back to this larger discussion that I want to have, or just put out there on my soapbox, which is, my biggest problem with Marvel movies up until now, which we've talked about on Re-MCU, is stakes, right? It's the idea that these movies don't tend to have a lot of stakes to them. Specifically, if you think about how many, fake character deaths there are throughout the course, like, you get a fake Coulson death, and you get a fake Nick Fury death, and you get a fake Loki death. And so it to me, it undercuts or cheapens the narrative of something, because are you really concerned that this character is dead or is really going to never come back or something like that? And so, that's the problem I think that it has with stakes. And I think the problem that happens with this multiverse thing was that the movie didn't have any stakes for me watching it, and so I found it hard to care about anything, because in the movie you have Doctor Strange hopping to other universes within the multiverse, and so suddenly everyone that he's interacting with is someone that we have either not met before, or it is a completely different version of what we know. So like, I don't know why I'm supposed to care about like Doctor Strange fucking off in another universe, interacting with characters that have that is seemingly antithetical to what the MCU has been, which is like, building off of everything that came before it. This is swerving in a different direction that gives you different versions of characters, or that kind of thing. So for example, there is a big scene in the movie where they are on a multiverse, and that's when all of the cameos happen. So spoiler alert, last chance, last warning. You see multiverse characters of Black Bolt, which we haven't really seen, but was in the Inhumans series, I believe.
Oh, really? I have no idea.
And I think it's the same actor, too. And then you have...
go ahead, sorry.
You have Haley Atwell playing Peggy, but she is... it was the universe in which she became like the Captain America character. And then you have Professor X, which is a different universe than the Professor X that we have seen with the X-Men movies, still played by Patrick Stewart. And then you have John Krasinski as your fan-casted Reed Richards. And so, like, while I like what they do in the movie, which is that essentially, you get what they've sort of been building to, which is that Scarlet Witch is like the most powerful Avenger. Like, that's something that I think has been known by like comic book people, but hadn't yet been shown in the movies. And basically they introduce this multiverse, Illuminati team, and Scarlet Witch just brutally murders all of them. And while that's fun in theory, like, again, I just didn't care about that whole segment of the movie, because again, why do I care about like the connective, the story of, why do I care about seeing a different version of Professor X, right? And that's different than everything that we've ever seen. Like, I have no attachment to this version of this character, or I have no connection to Reed Richards. So why do I care that he gets, brutally killed or whatever? And so for me, again, the stakes aren't there where, like that to me, and within this movie, it doesn't mean anything. And I think the taking advantage of this multiverse idea, I think, could be the thing that could finally give me Marvel fatigue, because clearly they're building up America Chavez as being like a really important character who's going to be the way that these characters jump into other multiverses. And so that presumably opens the door for anything. And this poor young actress is probably locked into this for the rest of her life as this character, because now they can provide the multiverse stuff with an explanation. But like, this presents the potential of an opportunity to, like, bring back, characters that are dead. They could just open up the multiverse and grab a different version of it. There's a way there's an idea that, like if an actor wants to step away, they'll just pull in another actor from the multiverse thing. And I think that it creates this potential for like this endless loop where narrative arcs don't ever end because you can just, you use the multiverse for it. So for me, the multiverse stuff, especially in a movie like this, just feels like a sandbox that they're playing in. And I think a way to do something narratively bold, but without taking the actual risk of giving it any meaning. Because again, it's bold to kill all of those characters, but it doesn't have any meaning because it's all related to a universe that we've never been to. So I think that it feels like a bit of has the real potential for like cop out kind of stuff with that multiverse. So that's the thing I'm worried about, but I still think it's present in smaller doses within this movie itself. So anyway, for me, I think again, the movie never really takes off for me. I think it gets better when it goes full Raimi, but I still think that this movie is like needlessly complicated and convoluted. I think it's a bit of a mess for the most part, and it just never quite clicked for me. And then, like I said, I had trouble caring about it just because it's so dependent. Its main Doctor Strange story is entirely dependent on his interaction with a different version of that Rachel McAdams character, which again, at the end of the day, it's technically speaking a character that he's never, that this Doctor Strange has never met before. So I just had trouble with the stakes of it all. And I foresee some trouble moving forward with the development of this kind of new storyline.
I understand what you're saying. I just don't necessarily agree with it. I feel like there's pretty great potential to have a lot of fun with this. And I think that's what this movie... I feel like that's what this movie was all about. As opposed to... well, not as opposed to, but... It was like the cameos to me are more about, and the different versions are more about just playing in the sandbox of what now Marvel has available to them in this Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it feels a little bit like just a kind of stretching of the legs, I guess, and bringing in John Krasinski as Reed Richards and again Patrick Stewart as Professor X. I don't think anybody expected anything more than a cameo for that. I don't feel like it's a big cop out. I feel like it's more so it introduces narrative problems for the future when they do introduce the X-Men and Reed Richards. Yeah, here are these people that are supposed to have been around forever. Right. That said, though, I still had a whole lot of fun with it, and I think probably that came from me buying into the Raimi-ness of it all, because I hadn't realized how much I missed Sam Raimi in these last, Oz the Great and Powerful sucks, but the sensibility he brought to the Spider-Man stuff, and then the Raimi twists that are there, the kind of signature stuff you mentioned, is really fun. And the Danny Elfman soundtrack, I could pick out instantly. Probably the weirdest thing to me about this movie that frustrates me the most is it doesn't really seem related to the multiverse adventure that we just had in Spider-Man. Yeah. It kind of glosses over that almost entirely. Like, it mentions Spider-Man once, but you just opened up the multiverse and now we're back into it, and there's no kind of acknowledgement of what it is and what it was. And that reminds me of the kind of the Phase 1 era of Marvel, Phase 1, Phase 2 era, most notably stuff like Iron Man 3 having nothing to do with Ultron, Age of Ultron that came after it, and being totally disconnected when it came to what was happening thematically in one movie versus the next.
Well, and I think too, I had a bit. I don't know if you felt this way, but this sort of had a feeling for me of like they were sort of writing the rules as they went along, because to me it seems like there were a lot of opportunities for this stuff to have meant something during like the Infinity War timeline that just, I guess, conveniently hadn't been, established yet.
Sure, we could get into that stuff all day long too. Like, where were the Eternals, and why are there also Greek gods and Egyptian gods? If you've been watching Moon Knight, I don't mind the idea that you had to be full on into WandaVision to understand what was happening in this movie, because Disney's made it pretty clear that that's how they're going to do this from now on, and I think it's, for better or worse, it's ballsy as shit. Because I had to look up that Anson Mount played Black Bolt in the Inhumans to know that he was like, oh, I didn't realize that was also a fan casting thing, because they brought him back to play. I was like, oh shit, I hadn't seen that show. But that's the show. That's from the era when Marvel was like, we know you're not going to watch everything.
Yeah.
But the idea that there's multiverses out there that have these different heroes, I'm okay with it. Again, it throws in some stuff that doesn't necessarily make sense for the proper Marvel universe going forward. Is it just a coincidence that the fake multiverse traveler Mysterio called Earth the same thing, that because he calls it Earth 616 and it's Earth 6 anyway, just shit like that, little dinky plot points like that. Still, though, I enjoyed this movie quite a bit, and I don't really understand I don't know that I understand the criticism of it being messy enough, or being messy as something that is a hindrance to it, because I feel like, there's a lot of shit going on, but I don't feel like it's a detriment to the movie personally.
Yeah.
I do see, we just meet this America Chavez character, and she's immediately like, we start kind of in the middle of some action in this movie.
Right.
Again, one of your famous, LGBTQ Marvel characters who makes absolutely no mention of their sexuality, except for
not like explicitly. It's just like you have to put the clues together or whatever.
Anyway, that said, I like the actress, Xochitl Gomez, I believe is her name, who I didn't realize was an actual teenager. They keep calling her a girl, and anyway. Also, the not counting No Way Home, the second Marvel movie in a row that's very much a product of the director. For better or worse, Chloe Zhao was all over the Eternals, and that movie was dull as shit.
Yeah.
But this is very much a Sam Raimi movie, and I wonder if that's going to be a new thing moving forward with Marvel, is these directors that maybe have a style different than...
I mean, I don't know, because we have different perspectives on it, because I don't know that it works, because Raimi... Like the moments of this movie that are the best are when Raimi goes full Raimi, but that's not the whole movie. And also you can tell that he is working within the confines of this very sterile Marvel story. The things that he adds to it aren't adding to the narrative or anything. It's just doing weird shit in fight scenes or filming things really differently, like those camera angles and stuff like that. Those they're mostly visual flares and stylistic choices and stuff like that, but he's still working within this he's this movie is just another one of those it's setting up the multiverse type of thing. And I think that goes back to another complaint I have, because I love Doctor Strange. That first movie I think is one of the better later era MCU movies. I really like that movie a lot.
I don't remember it all that well, and I don't remember being a big fan of it, but
yeah,
it's been a long time.
Well, in this movie, Doctor Strange is the third most important character in the movie, and it doesn't feel to me like a Doctor Strange movie. Like I said, it feels like an America Chavez introduction, and it feels like a WandaVision finishing thing, and it feels like Doctor Strange is just on a side quest. That's sort of how it felt to me. So I don't think that it really pushed his arc any, and I think that in a Doctor Strange movie, I would prefer that to happen. And I think that that character actually gets a bit shortchanged in the whole mix.
It does have some of the early Marvel feel of a returning to the status quo at the end of it. Problems that I especially the Iron Man movies had. Yeah, I don't know. It feels right though for me, the way they've been using this Doctor Strange character, like the glue that holds everything together. Whether or not you like that is a different story, but I feel like it's true to what they've been using the character for since his debut.
It also is strange, not only do they not reference the multiverse stuff from Spider-Man No Way Home, but they also don't write it into his character at all, like any bit of like regret or remorse or second guessing the idea that he basically opened up the multiverse and made that mistake of like having listening to Peter convince him to do that kind of thing, which was a very un-Doctor Strange-like thing to do in the first place, and it's not even referenced here. It is a little funny, I think.
Yeah, I don't really remember where we were left at the end of No Way Home. Like, did he complete the spell that made people forget Peter, or did he make people forget that this multiverse had opened? I don't remember what had happened.
I think that he brought oh man, I don't remember the ins and outs of it.
I don't either, because I felt like yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
because this is not a unique problem to this movie that it ignores somewhat what the last one did. I don't know. I everything that I've talked about that I had an issue with ultimately is kind of moot to me because I did enjoy it so much. I recognize its narrative shortfallings, but it was just a lot of fun to me and kind of like nonstop. And looking back at something like the Spider-Man 2, Raimi Spider-Man 2, there's not a lot that Raimi brings to it other than the stylistic nature of it, and I think that's on display here. It is a more rigid structure, but there's a fucking scene in the middle of that movie where Peter is walking around to "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head" from Burt Bacharach, and it makes no sense to the character.
Yeah,
but it's just a little visual, like a little flare that drives home some atmosphere. But that there's so much Raimi style in what's typically been known as an assembly line, I think is a bit of a minor miracle. We'll see if that, if Taika Waititi, his, creativity keeps going. It looks like it is from what we've seen from the new Thor. But
yeah. Anyway,
what's your grade for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Cody?
Yeah, as I said before, I think that I think most of this movie doesn't work. I think that there are some good elements of, Raimi, and I think the third act does have some fun stuff in it when it starts to really lean into the horror aspects and horror elements of it. I mean, look, there's straight up jump scares, multiple jump scares within this movie. Like, there are elements of horror to it. For me, like I said, you talked a little bit about how the sandbox thing is fun, and I think that it can be fun to a degree, but like I said, my concern is that it cuts into narrative heft, and I think the thing that is seems to be lacking so often in these Marvel movies is narrative heft, meaning, true arcs, true emotional weight, that kind of thing. And I think that if they treat this thing like a sandbox, they can do, like I said, bold or ballsy things, but without taking the actual narrative risk of doing it with characters that are long established. So my fear, I hope my fears aren't true, but I feel like this multiverse could really kind of wear me out a little bit finally, which, to Marvel's credit, I have not felt worn out from the Marvel stuff yet, but this opens up the potential. But looking at this just in a bubble, in a vacuum for what it is, to me, it's too messy, too convoluted, and there's too much that don't interest me, or that doesn't interest me, to recommend it. So I give this a C+. I think it's on the lower tier of Marvel stuff within the modern MCU.
That brings up an interesting point, because I feel like with the absence of Captain America as he was, there's not really a good sort of human analog for the superheroes right now, not analog, but like a an audience surrogate as like a normal guy. Not that Captain America was supposed to be a normal person,
Right.
but like Doctor Strange as a sorcerer, like he could pretty much do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's the narrative stakes there are going to be pretty narrow anyway when this guy can fly and conjure up spells and all this shit. But maybe that's what's for sure going to be needed moving forward. Anyway, I did have a lot of fun with this movie. The stuff, some of the stuff doesn't hold up to narrative scrutiny, and if you're not on board with the multiverse stuff or having watched WandaVision, you're gonna be a little lost. But that said, I had fun with it, and I think it's enjoyable, so I'm gonna give it a B. I wonder if you like this is the first thing that required Disney Plus viewing.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder what will possibly be next that's required Disney Plus viewing, because probably not Thor: Love and Thunder.
Mm-hmm.
Probably I don't even know what's in the pipeline.
New Captain Marvel, maybe? Because
Probably.
isn't there like the Marvels Disney Plus show?
There's is it Ms. Marvel or is it just called The Marvels?
Oh, I think the movie is called The Marvels, and I think the show is Miss Marvel.
There's Ms. Marvel coming out later this month, and I believe there's a Secret Invasion show.
Oh yeah,
happening. So yeah, that'll probably be majorly needed to watch. I like this approach. This has been like the dream approach for, I love TV and I love movies. And the idea that these things connect to one another, that was always my biggest problem with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Other than I thought it kind of sucked. Just the idea that, like, it didn't really matter having watched the show, like it wasn't going to affect anything.
Mm-hmm.
And, I never watched Agent Carter or The Inhumans, but The Inhumans seemed like, I don't think anybody saw The Inhumans.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Good for Anson Mount, though, getting that cameo bump right before his new Star Trek series starts. So, all right, that's going to do it for this week. Next week, Cody, I have no idea what's happening.
Yeah, we don't have much on the wide releases. I think the biggest wide release is Firestarter.
Oh yeah, a movie that's like has no buzz whatsoever.
Yeah, no, seriously, and I can't remember if it's also getting a Peacock release. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's theaters and Peacock. But yeah, that's Zac Efron is in it.
Well, notably a remake of a movie that starred Drew Barrymore in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a guy I went to middle school with was cast in a TV series remake of it when we were in middle school. So everyone was like, "Oh, look, he's famous." And then I think he had like no speaking lines in it.
Oh, so he had like a cameo.
Well, he was part of the cast, but I think either like maybe his character was silent or something like that. I can't remember.
I don't remember a TV version of this.
Yeah, it was called Firestarter Rekindled. Oh, it was a TV movie.
Oh, it's a TV miniseries in 2002. What was this guy's name? Do you know?
Travis Sheridan.
Wait, who starred in this? Malcolm McDowell,
Marguerite Moreau,
Danny Nucci, and Dennis Hopper. Wow. I'm assuming Marguerite Moreau played. Yeah, she was the. Wow, I had no idea. I've never actually seen the original film either, so I don't know much about it. I know it's a Stephen King movie, but
yeah. So there's that. And this is a Blumhouse movie, so that's interesting. Mm-hmm. And then there's some smaller stuff. There's a movie I saw at Sundance a couple years ago that's finally coming out. It's Jerrod Carmichael's directorial debut. It's called On the Count of Three. And then also at that Sundance was the movie Pleasure. That is a movie about the porn industry that's getting a limited release. You want to make a wide joke?
I'm Well, I'm
Opening
hoping
wide?
for a full release.
That
Opening
works
wide,
too.
yeah.
So maybe we'll cover
At the
that.
box office.
Orifice.
Uh-huh.
So and it, I don't know if it's streaming. And anyway,
Wait.
that was
that was a P joke.
a P joke, yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha. But I would like to cover it because it's a really good movie. So maybe
Okay.
we'll try to cover that. So we'll see. We'll have something. I think I would be curious to get your view on The Count of Three, that Jerrod Carmichael movie.
I just don't like that he pronounces his name that way because it fucks with my pronunciation.
That is true.
Yeah.
And he's more famous than you, so he gets the default.
It is true. It is true. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Yeah. So I'm forever Jerrod now, the Jerrod Carmichael, who spells his name the exact same way as I do. I think I'm like he's gotten a lot higher profile in the last few years. So it's really because I remember first seeing him like, he spells his name the same way. Well, and then now it's like, fuck, he's on Saturday Night Live and has a massive Netflix special. Anyway, if you want to reach us, you can email us at podcast@cinesnob.net. You can find us on Twitter @cinesnob, Facebook cinesnobnet, youtube.com/cinesnob. Cody, what else you got? The Ramble.
Yeah, Ramble should be returning here soon. Ramble Radio Tuesdays, Fridays, regular Ramble on Wednesdays.
All right. Anything else before we go?
Nope. Just a happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there that listen.
Yeah, I wonder how many there are. I don't think my mom listens.
Yeah.
All right. Our old pal Jocelyn's a mom.
Oh, yeah.
So she's got 2 kids, and
yeah,
they're mom stuff. All right.
Well said.
That yeah. On that note, I'm Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafania.
Thank you for listening to the CineSnob Podcast. To read reviews, interviews, and more, visit cinesnob.net. See you next week.